Rapid City is on the precipice of something great, perhaps even something historic. But in order for that to happen, there has to be something that happens inside the people who live in the city. A rediscovery of something that has generally been lost in America over the last 2+ centuries. Our founding fathers, as they penned the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, understood something that has over the years been lost as we as Americans have pursued our individual interest and the newest, best, shiniest. We've forgotten some important lessons. So it's pretty normal as human beings to forget things. We have to have lessons that we relearn or rediscover and learn them again. I've got good friends, Ed and Carol Emerson, who recently were thrust into a situation where they had to raise their grandkids. So not having raised kids in over 25 years, they had to relearn some things, and they told me a couple of things that happened. Of course, you learn really quickly that any language you use, Doc, might be repeated again by those little ears that are around. You also learn that if you complain about something on a regular basis, that you might hear that coming back to you again in a form that might be pretty interesting for you. You learn things like, they've told me, and of course this is an obvious one, and yet not so much for them at first, that you want to give things to your kids or your grandkids, and so of course the kid's fascinated with a bright, shiny new object for a while, but what kids really need is, of course, time and attention. So they had a number of lessons that they had to relearn as they raised their kids. Many like experiences you have had, I'm sure. But society also has to relearn some things. And there are some things that have been lost over the years that are just now being rediscovered. A couple of them are pretty interesting. Do you ever expect to see that on the bestseller list? Any of you at least 30 years old or older, there was no eating fat to get thin. And of course now we've got our nice young woman who's telling us that her best diet tip is how I stay skinny while eating fats. So perhaps if you haven't heard, this is the new thing now. And it's really a rediscovery of something that was around long ago. All the farmers at the turn of the 20th century used to live to be 80+ years old, and they ate bacon and eggs every day. I mean, it wasn't killing them. And so now, finally, science has kind of gotten back and rediscovered that, you know, maybe some of the things that we said weren't good to eat from in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, maybe we ought to get back to it. Another thing that we've started rediscovering is some new uses for some old remedies. Again, we're so used to going to the pharmacy, get the bright, shiny new pill box that's on the pharmacy shelves, and that will help us take care of whatever the issue is we're dealing with. When in fact, there are some old remedies that have been lost. One of them, most interesting that I came across, was a combination. This was a 1,000-year-old Anglo-Saxon remedy that in last year they just rediscovered and started testing it in at the University of Nottingham in England, the microbiologist. It was a concoction of cow bile, wine, garlic, and leeks. And what they have found in their initial trials was it is the most effective thing around for killing MRSA. MRSA, the flesh-eating bacteria that is the bane of hospitals across America. This 1,000-year-old remedy does better than the new and the best pills that we've got and antibiotics that just don't work on that particular deadly disease. Well, there are other things like uses for garlic, uses for cloves, uses for cinnamon that we've forgotten, and yet you go back and you read some of the old books on more natural remedies, and we're discovering there's some great uses for this. So society is learning those, but there's another area that society needs to relearn, and this is a challenge to everyone in this room. And even though I'm speaking to Rapid City here and talking about Rapid City's collective impact in a few moments, I want you to understand that this is true for all of Western society. That Western society has lost something that was common to our founding writers of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, something they knew, that's also common to traditional societies and indigenous peoples around the world. And it has to do with the connectivity of the individual to community and the essential nature of that. This idea of the individual and the community. The Declaration of Independence talks about we've got this inalienable rights for the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. So we take that word happiness to mean something, that I have this individual right to pursue my own happiness. Justice Anthony Kennedy, in a 2005 presentation to a National Conference on Citizenship, referred back to that phrase and how the definition of happiness in 1776 was vastly different than what we understand it today in our modern times. What it meant was the self-worth and quality of life that the individual receives from being a part of and contributing to his or her community. That was the normal definition of it. So it was both individual and community, that this makes a great pair, that you can't have one without the other. It was so deeply embedded in the culture of that time, and by the way, those writers of those documents also studied the traditional societies around them. The Iroquois Confederacy, 7 tribes of the Northeast and Southern Canada, had these ideas about community that are embedded in our Constitution. And the essence of community is right there at the founding of this country. So it's a great pair, the individual and community. We've got to have both. And it's really no different than what would up be without down? You got to have both to have the Black Hills. What's positive ions without negative ions? Well, it's certainly not electricity. They're just supposed to be together. We're supposed to, what's east without west? Well, okay, so maybe here in West River, maybe we could do without East River, I'm not sure. Well, no, but then we wouldn't be West River if there wasn't an East River, right? So that's the symbiotic relationship between individual and community that we need to rediscover. Let me talk a minute about individual. The creationist view of the individual is that we are created in the image of the Creator, and there could be no greater honor than to be made in the image of the Creator. From a Darwinian evolution point of view, it took 6 billion years to reach the apex of evolution, which is the human being. Here we are. What an amazing thing. Even in the mystery schools of ancient Greece and the Hermeticist tradition, the individual is the result of eons of activity of angels working and forming and crafting the human being. So the individual, though, and the dignity of the individual, what is that? There is something that, again, is part of this rediscovery of this lesson, that we are not sole individuals without a community around us. None of us got to be here without a community helping us be where we are today. Think of all the advantages we've had with parentage, with education, with food availability, with a society that supports and nurtures us. And I know many of us have stories of challenge, but we as individuals, the community is in us. And the dignity that comes from realizing, look, I am thankful for all that has helped me get to be where I am today. I am grateful for all of those teachers that I've had, for all of those who have around the world done the kind of farming that brings food to my table. You can go down the list, and to have that attitude of gratitude for the community, that's the pair. That's the up without down. You can't have them. We've got to have both community and individual together. And that's the dignity of the individual. The community, so let's look at this community of Rapid City. We've got a city that in many ways has great things about it, and at the same time has some challenges. And a lot of what needs to change and what needs to be rediscovered is something inside us. It's our perception of our community. Who am I in relation to community, and what is my community? So if you take Rapid City as a community, just so you know, there are about 10,000 of the 75,000+ people that are here that are living below the poverty line. There are several thousand more who are living just above the poverty line and have a very difficult time and need services of some sort or another. There are 8,000 to 9,000 people in town who are food insecure, meaning they live with a constant uncertainty of when they're going to be able to get fresh, available food. I don't mean that they're starving to death. I just mean that they're insecure about food and they don't know for sure where food's coming from. We've got about 650 homeless people in town and about 1,000 who are right on the border of becoming homeless, one paycheck away from being there. A lot of needs in this community. Do we see this as us? Do we understand that to have a full range of happiness, as Justice Kennedy, he had this phrase that that's where happiness comes from, the dignity of being a part of and contributing to the community in which you live. And so this is the challenge that we have, to change our mindset, to see our community and say, this is mine, and these people who are in this town, they're also mine, and I am them. And so you'll see there's some great signs of this in Rapid City already. You go down the Main Street Square on Thursday night, it's amazing. It's fabulous. What a great sign. There are lots of activities. The arts are flourishing in this town. All signs of a community moving towards this sense of, hey, this is our community. But there's a lot more that can be done. And so I am the director of Rapid City Collective Impact. This began about 10 months ago. I was brought to town by 4 individuals, Brent Phillips the CEO of Regional Health, Jim Skull of Jim Skull Construction, Ray Hillenbrand, businessman and philanthropist, and Sandy Deagle, the CEO of the John T. Verkerovich Foundation. And the bottom line message was, help Rapid City better serve the needs of its citizens and improve the quality of life for the city. So that's a rather broad, big challenge, and there's great support and help throughout the community. A lot of things had been prepared before I got here, so we're on our way down the road towards this. The idea of collective impact, so that may be a strange term to some of you. I just briefly explained that it was a term coined about 4.5 years ago, but it grew out of some studies, particularly one that was really interesting in Cincinnati, Ohio, where several school districts in the greater Cincinnati area got together and they decided to do things together. They started, and this was all for the education of their kids, 60 community organizations joined with the school districts to mutually reinforce what each other was doing, to have the same vision of what they wanted to accomplish with their kids, to have open communication between all these agencies, and the end result was, over a 3-year period, they were the highest achieving school districts in the nation year after year. And then when this article came out, it used this term collective impact. It's all about people working together, serving together in order to make life better for everybody. So that's in essence what we're doing here in Rapid City with collective impact. The idea that in this town are the resources needed to better the lives of everybody that lives in this town. We've just got to coordinate it better, communicate better, collaborate better, and there is this rediscovery piece of rediscovering a sense of community. I want you to know there are people who live in town that don't feel like this is their town, and that's something that needs to change. And it's going to happen all across the city to say, this is my city, I want to make a difference here. So my challenge to you is that in fact you do make a difference in this town, and you do start to look at, you know what, the fullness of the happiness of myself as an individual that I can receive is going to be as I am contributing to the community around me in a way that lifts the entire community. Find ways to do that, and we're going to build a Rapid City that we're going to all be proud of, and we're going to be able to leave to the next generation something that is going to last for a long, long time. Thank you.